It can be easy to fall victim to the tidal forces of the NFL if they want to sweep you away to irrelevance, to just kind of go with it. Unless you think you're ordained by God to succeed. Welcome to the Everyman series on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who listen every single day. Look, if you're an everydayer here in June, you're a real one, okay? I love you. A lot of people come and go for the big news stories, for the season, for the draft. But if you're here every single day, if you're here now, that's how I know you're a real one. You're my favorite. Don't tell everybody else. If you're new here, hello and welcome. You're also my favorite because you decided to join in June. That rocks. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast. My name is Luke. I'll be your host, and you can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can go to YouTube as well, or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today, we are doing a longer entry into the Everyman series. This is where we go over the backstories of every new Viking. Guys who will make the team, won't make the team. Everybody's stories are compelling and everybody's stories matter, if you ask me. So I'm going to tell them the best that I can. And this one starts on February 26th, 1996, where a 16-year-old girl in Danville, Illinois, has a child and has to raise this child. It is not easy going, but she is surrounded by a pretty robust support system, and everybody splits a little bit of the work while she's balancing school and a job at Burger King to, help make money to raise the kid. Grandma's getting involved. Uncles are getting involved, spending time until she can get home and take over parenting duties. And she works her ass off to raise this kid. And that willingness to work hard to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds, just going to file directly into her son. This is the Sherfield family. Tight-knit, work ethic out the wazoo, but goodness gracious, it is hard. There is one moment where they have to live in a motel room for 5 months with 5 people all crammed in there. He's been through the ringer, Trent Sherfield. His dad, his biological dad, not really in the picture. They've reconnected since and they're cordial, I guess, but he's not really part of the story, especially growing up. He's mostly raised by his mom, of course, and then like grandma and uncles and stuff. And his stepfather is a guy, or he refers to him as his stepfather. It's actually his brother's father, but his name is Thomas Reed. Thomas Reed really does a lot of the work into raising this kid and is the true father figure to Trent Sherfield. But he's not the only father figure. There's also DeJuan Goward. I am so sorry if I mispronounced that, who is also his stepfather, his real stepfather, who is still his stepfather, at least as of 2023, which is the last time I saw something big and long written about him that I sourced for this. By the way, there is a phenomenal piece at Go Long TD about Trent Sherfield that's going to cover a lot of the same information I cover here. Not all of it, but I'll link it in the show notes. You should absolutely go read it. But Thomas Reed, very competitive guy, and that rubs off on Trent Sherfield, but little Trent, as a kid, kind of a screw up. He's kind of all talk. He wants to go D1, but his grades suck, and he's not really putting in the work necessary to be that kind of guy. I think he's 16 years old when this conversation happens with his mom, and his mom is going to sit him down and say, hey, look, we can't pay for college. Like, if you're going to college, you're going on a scholarship or you're not going. Like, that's the reality of the situation. She sits down and she kind of explains this to him. And around that same time, his stepdad, DeJuan, says, hey, man, that's not going to happen. You're too lazy, dude. You don't work hard enough. It's not going to happen. I'm just being real with you. And it comes from it definitely comes from a place of love, from a place of he needs to hear this. And he to this day, will talk about that moment as the kick in the pants that he needed to realize, I need to approach this differently if I'm going to achieve this NFL dream from where I am in Danville, Illinois, to actually get noticed like at all. And that's exactly what he does. He pulls his act together, he pulls his grades together, and he starts writing letters. It's a similar story to a couple that we've told before, where nobody's going to see you in this like stupid little backwater town. You're going to have to reach out. So he starts going to the camps. He starts writing letters, and kind of has to just like hope for a bite. And he's fueled by this fire that his stepdad lit under him. And there's going to be this theme of like succeeding out of spite that has propelled so much of Trent Sherfield's career, which I personally think rules really hard. Somebody told you you're not going to make it. And now, just because screw that guy, I'm gonna. I love it so much. He will, hear a couple of details from that Go Long article. He would set up leaf bags in his backyard and like zigzag around them like they were trash cans on a football field. He would call receivers. He played D-back in high school. He would call receivers over to like run routes against him so he could like get in extra practice and one-on-ones. He did everything he possibly could. All he needed was spite to spur him on. And if you didn't know it, and you didn't know that all this was going on, you would be really surprised when he suddenly showed up on his high school football team and absolutely popped off. The work showed out. And the difference between what he could do and what he could do if he applied himself was very, very apparent. And suddenly he had been doing enough where people started responding to his letters. He got correspondence from a ton of schools. I think Penn State was one. He actually got a response from Alabama, which tickled him a lot because he loved, like, he was like, oh my God, I'm hearing from Nick Saban. They didn't offer him, but it was just cool to like hear back. And ultimately he chose Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was about a 5-hour drive down to Tennessee, which is not far enough to feel like you can't see your family anymore, but not close enough where your family can't like keep bugging you. It's perfect for a college student. And he had kind of clicked off step one of the dream, which is play D1. Now, the dream was very quickly going to transform into getting to the NFL, but first you got to get used to college life, right? Now, like I said, he played D-back and quarterback in high school, so when he got to Vanderbilt, they said, hey, we're going to try you actually at wide receiver. And he played a little DB, he played a little wide receiver, he didn't really know wide receiver, so he kind of redshirted. And then in his second year, he was slated to move to wide receiver, actually start getting on the field. And that was kind of, all right, it's your time to shine. You've now had a year to learn the position. Let's see what you can do. But the other thing that happens is he becomes a little bit of an academic. And his mom will be like, yeah, I did not see that coming. He reads books now? It's crazy. But that was what Vanderbilt was. And I think that's part of the reason that a lot of kids choose Vanderbilt is because they do genuinely care about academics in a way that some of the blue chip football programs will say, yeah, just get your credit. Like, he really did have to write the paper. He really did have to go through the schoolwork as well. So he was a busy guy, learning a new position, going through all of his schoolwork, just living the college life. And then perspective comes crashing down on him when in May of his sophomore year, he gets a call from his mom that tells him that Thomas Reed has died. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is a great place to find whatever your car needs to keep it going or to keep it stylish. Your car is an extension of who you are. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has anything you can possibly need. They have over 122 million parts available for your ride or die. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your specific ride. So no more of figuring out if this is the right year of this part to go with my make and my model. eBay Motors has you covered. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. I remember being in college myself, and I was pretty far away from home. I went to college in Los Angeles. I still live in Los Angeles. My whole family and my whole world is in Minnesota. And just in the hectic chaos of college, I dropped the ball. I didn't call my parents enough. I didn't call my family enough. I didn't call all my old friends enough. And some of those relationships deteriorated and I lost them. And I regret it deeply. So I definitely get what Trent Sherfield's talking about when he talks about the regret that he feels for not keeping in touch a little better over the last 6 months that Thomas Reed was alive. Thomas Reed raised him until he was 13 years old, and then he split with his then wife and moved to Arizona. But he was a major formative father figure in Trent Sherfield's life. He died in an utterly tragic accident, completely out of nowhere. One of those, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how much I was taking this relationship for granted. And Trent Sherfield will fall into full denial. He's not, he talks about I couldn't accept that he was gone and that I couldn't reach out and talk to him one last time and that the last time I had talked to him was that long ago. It really hurts him. This relationship was not he called this guy dad. This guy really raised him, and he'll have an urn with some of his ashes in his dorm room. And it's another thing that he kind of carries with him as a motivation. It's another thing that says, I'm doing this for you. All this work that I'm doing, all this pushing myself that I'm doing this for you. And that's one more reason. And he's going to pile up a lot of these. So file that away in the back of your mind. The goal remains to go to the NFL. And there's this video that I should tell you about that's from the Go Long TD piece, where Trent Sherfield, he goes to All Nations Church, which is one of these big churches with big stage and stuff. And the pastor calls him up and has him run from one side of the stage back to the other side of the stage and then back and forth a few times. And then it's one of those I have blessed you and your life is gonna go crazy. Says, God has now worked a miracle on your hamstrings and you're gonna make it to the NFL now. And it's this really weird prophecy. If you're somebody that goes to one of these churches, you've probably seen a million things like this. For somebody like me that is not familiar with that, it is one of the more bizarre things I've ever seen. But to Trent Sherfield, you can see that it is having this powerful prophesizing effect on him. You can feel that he is speaking this into existence. And what's crazy is just about everything that this pastor said is going to come true. And one of the things that really sticks with him is you're going to go to the NFL and it's not going to be the way that you thought it was going to be. But regardless, now you've been touched by God. A miracle has been done unto you, and you're going to succeed now. This is the thing that he internalizes that's in his brain. And then a whole bunch of stuff that he can't control gets in his way and ruins it all. There is a tattoo on Trent Sherfield's bicep that says failure is not an option, which is genuinely one of the sickest tattoos I've heard of. That rocks super hard, but it truly is never going to be an option to him. And I think that's why he survives so many moments that just will kill a career outright. We come across a lot of these little inflection points when we do the Everyman series. And because we're talking about people that are on an NFL team and that did make it past this point, by survival bias, we never do see the time when it doesn't happen. But basically, he is going to now jump a whole bunch of hurdles that 1% of dudes jump. And he's going to make it, and he's going to find his way to the NFL. And the first one is that he doesn't get an NFL Combine invite, and he doesn't get drafted. He's a rando. He's just a dude that shows up that nobody really pays any attention to. And he takes that a little personally. Just like when his stepdad sat him down and said, you're too lazy, you're not going to make it. He said, I am going to prove you wrong. He works his absolute ass off. This is 2018, by the way, and he's an Arizona Cardinal. Now, if you remember the 2018 Arizona Cardinals, that was their Josh Rosen year where they ended up with the 1 overall pick and picked Kyler Murray the year after that. So this is a rough unit. It is not very talented over there. They have one guy. It is Larry Fitzgerald. And for whatever reason, Larry Fitzgerald really takes a liking to Trent Sherfield. there's one day in that camp where he has a bad practice, and Fitzgerald just writes a note that says something to the tune of, shake it off. I want you to stay here. And he's like, whoa, that is like Larry Fitzgerald just like told me that he wants me to succeed. And he just like takes that into heart. And he says like, okay, somebody believes in me. And he really needed that. He will make the Arizona Cardinals roster, and he'll work his way all the way up to wide receiver 2. And then in 2019, the Arizona Cardinals will select 3 wide receivers in the NFL draft alongside Kyler Murray. They're doing the rebuild thing, and Sherfield feels very much like the odd man out. And he's pissed. He feels super slighted by this. He's like, what? I thought I had a really nice season, and you just went and drafted 1, 2, 3 guys to replace me? What gives? All right, challenge accepted then. He's going to go back to camp, and he's going to work just that hard. And then somebody tells him, hey, you're doing great, but too bad. You're not going to play. Steve Keim wants to see the rookies play. He wants to see these draft picks go in. That's it. That pretty much spells the end of his time in Arizona. Nothing he could have done about it. The politics of the league, as Tyler Dunn puts it in his piece. And that's not the last time this is going to happen to him. Trent Sherfield, at this point, he's still playing in Arizona. He still made the team and everything, but he's mostly a special teamer. And he's going to take that job and run with it, and he's going to work really hard at it, and he takes pride in his work. It reminds me of an anecdote about his grandmother, who had a job as a Walmart cashier, and took so much pride in that work that people would actually wait in a longer line just to get her aisle, because she was always friendly and she knew everybody by name. And she took a lot of pride in a job that a lot of people would probably go about 70%, do just about well enough to not get fired and just try to get their paycheck and go home. This is that Sherfield work ethic that he grew up completely surrounded by. He took this special teams job very seriously, and he took his spiteful mission to prove Steve Keim wrong very seriously. And all preseason, all summer, all season, he embarrassed these guys. These guys were Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler, and Keyshawn Johnson. And none of them worked out for Arizona. They flamed out, and then they ended up trading for DeAndre Hopkins the next year. And by all accounts, Trent Sherfield did prove Steve Keim wrong, and he just kind of didn't admit it and went and got DeAndre Hopkins. But it's not as healthy as it sounds. He does kind of use hard work to cope with all this, but Trent Sherfield is, by his own admission, depressed by this. It feels so out of his control. He feels like he did so well and he had earned it, and he felt entitled to it. And the NFL doesn't really allow you to feel entitled to it, even if you're like pretty right to be entitled to it. He will run out of contract in Arizona, and he'll end up in San Francisco. San Francisco signs him specifically to be a special teams player because in all of this hard work, he got really good at that. And so they bring him in to be a special teams player. Not really a wide receiver at all. It's never really part of the plan for him. And he feels so excited to get a fresh start, and he gets into San Francisco, and then they draft Brandon Ayuk in 2020. And it's like, well, come on, man. They've got Mohamed Sanu there. They've got Deebo Samuel going into his second year. And there's no real room for him to really crack like the lineup. And so he's just going to be a special teamer again. And then he has a conversation with his wide receivers coach that sounds exactly the same in San Francisco as it did in Arizona. Hey, we love you, but they want to get Brandon Ayuk on the field, and they really want to get him some reps. So you're going to be a special teamer this year. Hope that's okay. Okay, bye. And he's pissed. And he falls into a depression again. He says this one's harder than the last time because he thought he was out of it. He's, at this point, leaning pretty hard on some of the wisdom that Larry Fitzgerald had given him over their time together in Arizona. And Larry Fitzgerald really, I think, kind of hammered the last bit of that like rambunctious trouble kid out of him, because Larry Fitzgerald went about things in a very boring way. everything was excruciatingly boring and tedious. And it was that kind of consistent embracing of the tedious that made Larry Fitzgerald so good. It was never flashy. It was never fun. He always, it was always up at 4 a.m. It was always up, working this hard. And it was sort of this reality check for Trent Sherfield that said, yeah, the league does kind of suck. Like this whole experience is kind of ass. It is not the flash and fun that you dream about as a kid. But to be successful, this is how you have to do it. And he has embraced that. So he's going to work really hard again. And for a while, he makes Brandon Ayuk look silly. Now, Ayuk will turn a corner and become a very, very good receiver. But for the first 8 weeks of his career, it's a rough start for Ayuk, and Trent Sherfield very clearly should be playing and isn't. So he's pissed off again. The next time he ends up being a free agent is 2022. And he meets up with the guy that was his offensive coordinator in San Francisco and saw all of this. That was Mike McDaniel. And Mike McDaniel, now head coach of the Miami Dolphins, brings him in and says, look, we're going to do things different. Now, they have Tyreek Hill in the building. They have Jalen Waddle in the building. This is not exactly a group that you're going to go become wide receiver one for. But he says, you want a job playing wide receiver, go earn it. Everybody can earn it. Nobody comes into this building with a predetermined idea of, what they're going to be. If you want a job and you think you deserve that job and you prove that you deserve that job, you get that job. This is a meritocracy. That's the way that Mike McDaniel puts it to everybody on his team. And when he says that to Trent Sherfield, it is just a huge weight, just rolls off of his back. So he goes into the Fitzgerald routine again and comes out the other side with a decent role player job. And there is this unbelievably cathartic 75-yard touchdown when the Dolphins play the San Francisco 49ers in 2022. You probably should go watch that highlight because it takes on a whole other context where he catches, I think it's a dig over the middle, and he just houses the thing by outrunning everybody. And my God, he wants it. You can just feel that extra motivation out of spite to go smoke that team that didn't think he was worth anything. And unfortunately, the Dolphins wouldn't win that game. 49ers would end up taking it. But that little moment that's ha, I told you I could score on you. There is a catharsis to that. He'll play a year in Miami. He'll play a year in Buffalo. And now he's sort of established himself as, okay, I'm a role-playing wide receiver. And that first part of his career where he was relegated to special teamer, he's laid down enough of a resume to put that behind him. And we'll see what happens in Minnesota. It's a wide open world. He's playing a lot with the threes right now, so we'll see. But it is a wide open world after Jefferson and Addison, right? Outplay Brandon Powell, outplay Jalen Naylor, and the job is yours. So we'll see where things go from there. But for Sherfield, just refer to the tattoo. Failure is not an option. I'll see you all next week. And as always, Skol.